As we've rounded in the last few weekends before the launch of Black Ops Cold War, we're winding down on the retrospective videos, but thinking about that, I think that if we were to end this little mini-series on the channel ahead of the new launch, what better way than to cover the first game that truly was supported and made for this current generation of hardware? Ghost to me was kind of the transition year marketed for all of major platforms, including that generational shift. But I mean, after all, Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 are coming in just under 2 weeks as well, so kind of ushering in a new era, closing the chapter on this current generation. So with that, we're going to be closing out the retrospective mini-series here on the channel this year with Advanced Warfare, a game that was admittedly quite polarizing then and still is probably now, but a game that introduced a whole lot to Call of Duty, some for the better, some for the worse. Today, after a decent bit of playtime over the last few days, I wanted to take a few minutes and discuss what it's actually like in 2020. So as we go along, let me know your thoughts down below. Did you like Advanced Warfare? Maybe not so much. Whatever it is, let me know. As well, if you are new to the channel, we're on that road to 400,000 subscribers, and with Black Ops Cold War and a new year of content coming up, we'll keep you up to date with absolutely everything you need to know in relation to the game. So if you're interested in joining the community, feel free to hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you. But anyways, let's talk about Advanced Warfare. First things first, I gotta say this one was actually really an adjustment for me. The other games that we talked about in recent months in a retrospective manner, not really so much because they're all on PlayStation 4. The only adjustment that I had to really make with those was going back down to an 80 FOV for default console after playing PC and on an FOV of 110 all year. But with Advanced Warfare, I had to go back to Xbox One for the first time in, well, actually a year. The last time that I was really on Xbox was when we were talking about Advanced Warfare and older games last year and how they played in 2019, which I realized at that time I'm kind of an idiot because I genuinely didn't use my Xbox. It was unplugged and stored away, yet I logged on for the first time to grab some footage and I still had Xbox Live. I've been paying for like, what is it, $10 a month or something for a whole year of service that I didn't use once. So that was something I was kind of upset with myself about. But jumping back to Xbox was kind of the biggest hurdle that I had here at this. After a few games though, it felt surprisingly natural. It just took a little bit of getting used to that Xbox controller and the stick locations, somehow not having control freaks anywhere to be found in my office, despite knowing for a fact that there's at least 3 to 4 somewhere around here. I just can't find them for the life of me. And also that shock of the gameplay that utilizes entirely different core mechanics, that's something that all quickly wore off. Now, as for the gameplay in 2020, firstly, how easy is it to find lobbies? Truth be told, it was relatively easy. The first game was, I think, kind of an anomaly. It took upwards of 2 to 3 minutes off the top of my head, but really outside of that, the only other time I had was maybe one bad matchmaking queue where it took about a minute. Everything else, though, relatively quick, probably 30 seconds or less at the max. Interestingly, though, most matches, if not all, I'd have to go back and check some of my footage here at this, they weren't full lobbies, some even being as low as 3v3, and you know that some of the maps in Advanced Warfare were relatively big, so 3v3 play was something that was kind of tedious, hit time limit, but you'd still find at least somewhat playable lobbies. As for the player base that I encountered, the player levels actually kind of surprised me, because as opposed to recent retrospectives where we found a lot of low levels, I was kind of amazed at how many high-level players, even how many Grandmaster Prestiges I came in contact with over the course of recording this footage. If you guys remember, Advanced Warfare had 15 Prestiges, right? But then like halfway through the year, Sledgehammer's like, just kidding, you thought you were done, and added in another 15 Prestiges, letting you go up to Grandmaster Prestige, which was that Prestige 30, I think it was. And I play a lot of COD, but I'd never dream of going that far. That is a lot of playtime that I just didn't really feel like sticking around for. Along the way though, there were added incentive that if you ended up going towards 15, 16, 17 prestiges, you'd end up getting these rarer variants for these Master Prestige rewards, but to me, I still didn't think it was quite worth it. As for skill levels, that's where I was, again, admittedly surprised, because I remembered back in the day, this game was notorious for being the first game to really prioritize skill in the matchmaking system. The game was absolutely known for how much reverse boosting there was. But in today's era, the game seems to have that entirely turned off, thankfully. But I'd imagine that's simply just because of the dwindling player counts. You would have some really bad connections if skill factors like score per minute, KD, win-loss, and others were the driving factors in who you played against in 2020. Like we mentioned, we weren't finding full lobbies as is, so imagine how that connection would be if you had to wait to play other players that were similar skill level as you. That would be something that would just be absolutely unplayable at that point. But overall, it was very easy to readjust and do well, even if you are a somewhat seasoned player. I know that I choked a few DNA bombs, which is a kind of a bummer because I remember either like last year or the year before, I jumped on for my first game, and I don't think I'll ever live up to this, where I jumped on first game on Fracture, dropped a DNA bomb. That was something that as a creator, you always want to get your footage early on so you can get to working on making the video, but that's something that never happens. So I don't think I'll ever peak at that point again. Did choke a few though, so we got some decent footage, I think. As for the mechanics of the game, that's where we can start to really kind of talk about it in 2020, but also transition into the overall feel of Advanced Warfare as a whole. Now, of course, you had the Exo and chain-based movement systems. That's something that definitely, having played Infinite Warfare, Black Ops 3, I think those games handled the movement way better than Advanced Warfare. It seemed kind of abrupt, a little too sharp here, going back to it, and I remember feeling that same way back in the day as well, but it was something brand new to Call of Duty. Verticality, there was so much of it because you had so much range with those boosts vertically, side to side, back and forth. That's something that verticality was built in, which I'm not a huge fan of, especially going back to it. There's so many times where you'll have to take a gunfight 2, 3, 4 stories up sometimes from the ground to where the highest player could be. The fluidity of the movement, again, I think Black Ops 3 and Infinite Warfare did it better, but for what it was, still relatively okay. Hit detection and lag definitely in 2020 are incredibly bad. That's something that a player would go behind a wall and you would definitely still keep shooting but still get that kill. They would be entirely out of your frame, but because of the connection, it would totally give you that kill for free. I know that even at one point there was actually a host migration, which is something that in today's era, I know people are like, it's not dedicated servers, but when's the last time you saw a host migration? That was something that really took me by surprise, but it was still in that peer-to-peer and hybrid system era of matchmaking for Call of Duty. Now, I'm not saying today's servers are anything fantastic, but definitely nice to have as opposed to playing off somebody's host where host advantage is actually a real thing. Create a class was a weird thing to go back to because we have systems like the pick 10 in some of the classics. We have some elements of that in other retrospective videos we've done as well, but Advanced Warfare was a pick 13, so you still had that option to have pick 10, but a little bit more in terms of what you could put into your playstyle. But you had wild cards, you had your weapons, you had your attachments, you had your perks that you could double up on, which I often did. Then you had things which was cool, with streaks, you could actually end up customizing the abilities here with this. There were a limited number of streaks compared to other games out there, but it is something that each of these had customizable options in which you could, for more or less score, adjust how these actually interacted in some cases. I think my main throughout the main year of support, and probably still because you see it in this video, was something unchanged, was that I had a UAV that was support and also something that showed, I think it was called the threat detection or something, where you could see them through the walls as well. So that was something that for the UAV, it cost a couple hundred more score, but it was something that was a different version of the UAV that made it custom tailored to how I wanted to play, which was pretty cool. Exo abilities were something that we were introduced to as well, a sort of precursor kind of to specialist items because it was something that was never seen before in COD pre-Advanced Warfare, but not quite to the extreme of specialists. Gunplay, you had minimal recoil on these weapons, but there also were, for the first time in Call of Duty, weapon variants that also were stat altering. So that means that it changed the dynamics of some weapons, and as a result, certain engagements that you may have as a player. Some may be offering more damage, some may be offering more fire rate, some may be offering more handling and mobility, whereas then you'd have decreases in drawbacks in other areas, but it was something that introduced stat altering weapons for the first time in Call of Duty. Now, other interesting pieces out of Advanced Warfare came in the way kind of like that weapon variant, but a whole new level of customization, not only just for the camos and things and some of the different variant exclusive designs that you had with weapons, but also a whole new depth of customization to every aspect of your operator almost. I mean, you could change your helmet, your gloves, your knee pads, your boots, your exosuit, your jacket. You had basically every part of your operator being customizable, and that was something that was cool or kind of tacky depending on who you asked. I know it definitely was something that varied from player to player. One thing I never understood was the killstreak-based uniforms like the Bloodthirsty gear, why that was something that was still, even to this day, timed for 30 minutes every time you ended up getting it, and then it would go away. Why it wasn't something that was like, unlock it X amount of times and it's yours forever. I kind of wish that was still like that because that gear set was actually pretty cool. But if you end up getting that DNA bomb, you only have that entire uniform set for 30 minutes. so not quite worth it in that regard. The armory was introduced to showcase all of these items, whether it be your operator customization items or whether or not it's something like your weapon variants. You could see everything available in here. You could even burn some duplicates to get XP out of it. You could sort it from rarity, from name, and take a look at everything you had on offer. From things like retired gear, which you can't get to this day, and making it super rare, which is pretty cool. Some elite stuff that you can still get in supply drops, and so on and so forth. The firing range was also something introduced within Advanced Warfare, a way that you could test out your weapon builds before actually jumping into the game, which was pretty cool and something that I think is one of the nicer features to have that I think kind of goes unsung in the games that it's been in. Advanced Warfare had a decent number of camos that looked pretty good. Interestingly though, there was no max camo, as crazy as that sounds in today's day and age because we've had it for so long, but you had things like Diamond and Royalty, and Gold actually wasn't a completionist camo in Advanced Warfare. Diamond was, and then Royalty was the Diamond of the normal classification, so all rifles would get you Royalty rifles. But there were definitely some cool camos. You had things in the shop, which wasn't too overpriced, but that was the last time that we'd see items actually introduced for a while after that point, but it was something introduced as well. One thing that I really enjoyed about Advanced Warfare, before we jump over to one other part before we wrap up the discussion with what I think is the downfall of Advanced Warfare, one thing that I really have to say is that it was a new era for COD, for better or for worse. Call of Duty took a chance, and that's something that every year before you'd hear, COD is just a copy and paste of the year before. And to an extent, that is something that is a valid argument. But then COD was finally like, okay, how about we change it up entirely? We don't do that copy and paste stuff, and we try something new. So I commend that ambition, that effort put into it, even if it didn't really hit the mark with a lot of people. Another thing that may have been hit or miss with people as well is Exo Zombies. The zombies experience with Advanced Warfare, which brought some cool features to it, I think, but overall it wasn't my cup of tea, but I really did actually like how it was introduced. It was unfortunately leaked by somebody that had the game early, so everybody knew about this on day one, but imagine that surprise if it hadn't been, where you play through Exo Survival and you're like, all right, man, well, I guess I'm done with this, I completed all of it, and then you get to the final cutscene, and it actually turns out that a DNA bomb goes off and turns everybody into zombies, starts that zombies outbreak, and from there, that's where the Exo Zombies comes into play. That was such a cool reveal, I think, that unfortunately got leaked before everybody could really experience it, but it is something that we saw Exo Zombies. That's something that then was hit or miss depending on who you were and what you thought of it. Now, to me, I think, again, kind of with Black Ops 3, the downside here to Advanced Warfare, minus a lot of that advanced movement, because it definitely was something that was a shock to people, especially at that time, and it may not have been something that people really enjoyed, but overall, I think probably the other biggest downfall was that of supply drops, because this was the year that started everything. I remember reading an article that interviewed Michael Condrey about the idea of them in post-Advanced Warfare, where they were, and I'll never forget the response in which he mentioned that that was never their intention to kickstart what became supply drops in Call of Duty. Instead, they just wanted to reward the player a little further with their playtime, add things that they could actually earn and have a random chance of getting some really cool items. They never intended, according to Condrey, to have these be monetized in any way. Just simply unlock via playtime, and whether you believe that or not, that's obviously not what happened. But having talked with so many folks at Sledge over the years, that vision to want to give players more and more organically seems to be genuine. There are those items like we've discussed with Master Prestige rewards and other cool free handout stuff that was available via in-game playtime, but that wasn't the only thing ever pitched. That wasn't the only stuff that really was on the table for discussion, and I'm afraid that I'll never be at liberty to say some of the cool stuff that has come out with my discussion with some people at Sledge, but it seems to be at that point, especially all an Activision side of things, where they saw that potential for revenue with Advanced Warfare and the following games, and those shortcomings with, say, things like the Prestige rewards were never really the intention of Sledge. I think the one thing that I can share, because it's vague enough, is that around the time of World War II Master Prestige rewards being teased and what could be coming here with that, the topic of weapon variants being reintroduced like they were in Advanced Warfare for Master Prestige levels was something that popped up, and then that discussion about how it was implemented in Advanced Warfare came up as a result, and apparently that royally pissed off Activision, because in their eyes, that quantifiable equivalent of a free weapon variant for your playtime to how much they'd make if a player had to chase that in supply drops, and those sales that you could make off of it to air quote earn that same variant was in the 8 figures. And that was only just for those 15 items, let alone everything else. So naturally, supply drops earned a boatload of revenue, and this would only be the start of the supply drop era for COD, with it getting more and more grossly anti-consumer as time progressed, until there was that point where they realized, okay, maybe people don't want to gamble. And I think that Modern Warfare is a decent example of that, where 2020, yes, the bundles are of course higher priced than I definitely would like, but when you see what you get up front, it seems like you'll make more sales like that, to which that's what Activision has actually reported. So supply drops started with Advanced Warfare, thankfully don't seem to be making a return here within Call of Duty, at least in the foreseeable future, but that's where we're gonna wrap it up. So with that, that's Advanced Warfare in 2020. Love to get your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. Once again, did you enjoy the game? Did you maybe not so much? Are you gonna jump back and try it out after seeing it here again in 2020? Whatever it is, feel free to let me know. But hopefully enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. We're gonna all things Call of Duty, especially as we round into Black Ops Cold War here in just 2 weeks time, and of course anything else in relation to Warzone and Modern Warfare in the meantime. If you're interested, hit that subscribe button. If you also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected outside of YouTube. I live on both those. If you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.